Contrary to their name, rare earths are abundant in Earth's crust, but they're often found commingled with other elements rather than in large deposits. Worldwide, China has the highest concentration of rare earth reserves, followed by Brazil, India, and Australia. The US ranks 7th in terms of available reserves. The process to separate rare earths from these other minerals is complicated, expensive, and requires specialized equipment and technical skills. The mining of these minerals also comes with the risk of potentially significant environmental damage.
The mining of rare earths, especially in China, is considered very polluting. When they extract these heavy rare earths, what they do is they use really harsh chemicals on the ground to extract this material in the form of clay, and that material ultimately seeps into the ground and pollutes the water body and kills the vegetation. And if you were to extract light rare earths, which are primarily concentrated in something called as hard rock mines, you need to use really harsh agents to blast off the rocks, which release clouds of dust, and they potentially pollute the entire environment.
Experts say that lower labor costs, weaker environmental standards, and strong government support have all helped Chinese companies become dominant in the rare earth supply chain.
About 70% of the actual mining of these materials rest in the hands of Chinese companies, and 90% of the processing. That's an incredible amount of dependency when you think about how important these materials are to running a modern economy.
China has had the monopoly in this market for a really long time. The reason being is that the cost of production of these separated rare earths and magnets is very low in China, and any producer outside of China cannot enter the market because these prices are what we called as sub-rational prices.
Experts say that the current US-China standoff with regard to rare earth elements can be traced back to 2018. During the first Trump administration, the US levied heavy tariffs on Chinese goods in an attempt to hamper China's Made in China 2025 initiative, which focused on transforming China into a global manufacturing powerhouse, particularly with regard to high-tech industries. During the Biden administration, the US also enacted restrictions around exports of advanced microchips to China, though these restrictions have since been reversed. The final straw in the collapse of trade relations between the two countries seems to have been the enactment of more tariffs by President Trump during his second administration, with tariff rates on Chinese goods reaching a high of 145% in April.
On April 4th, China decided to retaliate to this tariff escalation by implementing an export control on 7 medium and heavy rare earths. Also, this restriction applies to sending the material for any dual-use items. What this means is that any military organizations were considered as primary target. So defense supply was completely cut off.
China has slowly built out this export control toolkit, really mimicking and copying U.S. export controls to hit back at U.S. and other countries for actions that China believes are unfair to China. So although we are seeing it actualized over the last 7 months, China has spent the last several years building out this toolkit.
The Chinese export controls on rare earths disrupted a number of industries, with the EV sector being particularly hard hit.
Suzuki in Japan had to stop their production. Ford had to stop their production. Tesla raised concerns about their supply being disrupted because they had submitted applications for their humanoid production, and China assumed that it would be used for military applications.
While initially slow to approve licenses for exports of its rare earth materials, China has picked up the pace. This growth in exports came after Washington and Beijing agreed on a trade framework that included easing controls on Chinese rare earth exports in exchange for the rollback of some American tech restrictions for shipments to China. Still, experts say U.S. dependence on Chinese rare earths remains the country's biggest weapon in the trade war.
Once we can reduce it as an effective weapon, then we can get back to normal trade. But right now, for the Chinese, it's an extremely effective cudgel because we are so dependent.
The United States seems to be getting serious about establishing a domestic rare earth supply chain. In July, the Department of Defense announced a $400 million investment in U.S. rare earth miner and producer MP Materials. MP Materials owns the only operational rare earth mine in the U.S. at Mountain Pass, California. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan also backed the company with a $1 billion loan to fund the expansion of MP Materials' magnet-making operations.
The deal consists of three main parts. It's an investment in MP. It is price support for our commodity because, as we know, the